Hey, I'm Kelly. Today I'll be giving a very quick introduction to writing reports with R Markdown. So I use R Markdown pretty much every day for doing exploratory data analysis, for sending reports to my boss and sharing data with colleagues, for writing scientific manuscripts for publication, and even for writing slides to present. So let's get started here. I have RStudio open. I'm going to click File, New File, and then select R Markdown from the drop-down menu. And so this new window opens where we're going to tell RStudio a few things about this document. So first we need to pick a title, and I'm just going to call this Intro to R Markdown. It already filled in the author for me. And then we can select an output format for our document. So let's just go with HTML for now, but you can definitely feel free to explore other options. And especially as you get deeper into R Markdown, the template options are also a very useful tool. All right, so it created this document called Untitled1. So let's go ahead and save that and give it a better name. And I'm going to call it Intro R Markdown. All right, so the file ends in .rmd for R Markdown, and RStudio helpfully filled in some things for us already. So it filled in that title that we wrote, the author, today's date, and then the output format that we specified here. So if we scroll down, they've also filled in some text automatically to kind of give you a brief intro to R Markdown. So it starts off with a couple of hashes here, and this text turned green. And over here, if you, so this may have been hidden for you in RStudio, but if you click this little button here, it shows an outline of the document. And so whenever you use hashes here, that creates a heading. And the heading will then show up in the document outline, so you can easily jump to different sections of your R Markdown document. So you can paste in links here, and those will automatically show up in the output as links that you can actually click on. And then to create the output file from the R Markdown, we're going to click this knit button right here. And so in the R Markdown tab down here, it shows us the progress. And once that is finished, it switches us back to the console window, but you can see over here, it says output created, and then it shows us the name of the file. So over in the Files tab here, I'm going to select this file and say View in Web Browser. And so I'm going to move that over here so we can see it side by side. All right, so here's the HTML that our R Markdown document produced. And let me just also make this smaller. So it filled in the title, author name, and today's date. And then it skipped this part, which we'll come back to a little bit later. And then it showed this R Markdown heading here. So instead of showing hashes in the output, it actually turned this and made it bold and bigger than the rest of the text. So that's what hashes do. And you can actually include more. So the more hashes you include, the smaller your header is going to be. And let me just show you what that looks like now. So I'm going to click refresh once that's done knitting. And so here we have our new headers, which are at smaller levels than the previous one. So more hashes equals a smaller header. And all three of those show up in the outline kind of like this at different indent levels. So that's a great way to split up the different sections of your report. I'm going to get rid of those though, since they're not super useful for this one. All right, so moving on. So what's so cool about R Markdown is that you can embed code chunks. And the way you embed a code chunk is it will start with 3 backticks and then end with another set of 3 backticks. So right after that first set, we have these curly braces here. And the first thing we do is specify the language of our document, which by default is going to be R. And then this is a name for the code chunk, which also shows up in this document outline here, which is pretty cool. So in the code that they've inserted for us already, we just make a summary of the CARS data set. And I ran that with Command Enter as a keyboard shortcut, or I think on Windows and Linux that should be Control Enter. Alternatively, you can click this little play button and that will also run it. So we can see we have our code here and the output displayed in line. And then in our output document, it did the same thing. It showed our code here and then the output right after it. So that's pretty cool that you can see the code and the output that it produces right in the same document. And you can mix in descriptions and links and all kinds of things alongside that. So I want to point out here that there are these 2 asterisks around the word knit here, and they didn't show up in the document. Instead, it made the word knit bold. So that's how you bold words, is with 2 asterisks. Another thing you can do is italicize. So I'm going to italicize the word both with single asterisks. Save that and then knit it. And refresh our output page. And so now the word both is italicized in the output document. So you can do some nice little formatting tricks. All right. I think one of the coolest things is that if you create a plot with R Markdown, as they've done here, RStudio created this code chunk with a base R plot from the pressure data set. And by default, it's going to show the plot right here. And the plot is shown inside the HTML document over here. So I think that's pretty cool. And you'll notice that the echo equals false parameter was added up here in the settings of this code chunk. And so what that means is it doesn't include the code in the output file by default. So by default, it typically would, just like with the summary chunk, it did include the code in the output file. But here, since we set echo to false, it did not include that code chunk. And so if you want to change that, if you want to instead make the default the opposite, make the default echo equals false, you can change that in this setup chunk here, which they showed for us. So you can set echo equals false here, and then let's re-knit that. And now, that very first code chunk, it doesn't include the code in the output since the default was false. So you can set default parameters, you can override them inside the chunk. And I find that having echo equals false is useful for if you're writing a manuscript. Typically, you don't show the code that you use to create figures in your manuscript. Instead, you might include the code in the supplement or a link to your code, say on GitHub or something like that. So those are just a few options that you can use with R Markdown. And so let me just open this wider again. So what's great about the HTML output format is you can easily email these files, say, to your boss if you need to send a report or anything like that, to your collaborators if you want to share your data, and it will look exactly like this. So they can see the code that you have if you want to show that, and your plots, and then you can write in some text right alongside that to maybe interpret the results or explain the steps of your analysis. So that's it for a very quick introduction to R Markdown. I hope you get started with it and dive deeper into exploring all the cool things that R Markdown can do for you. That's all for now.